$296 plus all accrued interest. K, approve abatement of mobile home taxes pursuant to Iowa Code 555B, Section 8 on VIN number 7609 in the amount of $200 plus all accrued interest. L, approve abatement of mobile home taxes pursuant to Iowa Code 435.25 on VIN number L06 L11344 in the amount of $126 plus all accrued interest. M, approve abatement of mobile home taxes pursuant to Iowa Code 435.25 on VIN number 202275C2665 in the amount of $75 plus all accrued interest.
I would move the consent agenda.
Second.
McIntyre.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeCook.
Aye. I have 6:04, but we've got to be awfully close to 6:05, so I'm going to wait just a few moments. But looks like there's a public hearing regarding proposed authorization on loan agreement for the issuance of not to exceed $250,000 general obligation capital loan notes for essential county purpose. And
this is a public hearing for the board to hear from the public for a proposed authorization for a loan agreement and issuance not to exceed $250,000 general obligation capital loan notes for an essential county purpose to provide funds to pay the cost of acquisition, enlargement, improvement, and equipping of county buildings, including information technology, hardware, and software. The principal and interest on this proposed loan agreement would be payable from the debt service fund.
I would move that we go to a public hearing.
Second.
McIntyre.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeCook.
Aye. Okay, we are now in public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak?
I would move that we go back to regular session.
Second.
Last call. Tracy?
McIntyre.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeCook.
Aye. Does that move us to item number 3? We've done our public hearing. Item 3, resolution instituting proceedings to take additional action for the issuance of not to exceed $250,000 general obligation capital loan notes with possible action.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, Tracy?
McIntyre.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeCook.
Aye. Okay. Item number 4 is another public hearing, although that one is scheduled at 6:10, and to be compliant, we have 3 minutes to go. Number 5 is frankly a closed session, so we're gonna jump to number 6. Approved pre-construction agreement for primary road project. That's David.
This is like a lot of agreements you see in the past between the state and ourselves. This particular one's fairly minor, from a sense it just covers one roadway. But this agreement is for the state to provide an approach on Cleveland Street off the state road. I believe it's 316 by Swan. So it's just for one approach section. For instance, on 92, when they did the overlay, we covered quite a few of those, but in this case, it's just one approach. Any further questions, I can take those.
I move that we approve the pre-construction agreement for primary road project with the Department of Transportation and authorize the chair to sign.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Tracy?
McIntyre.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeCook.
Aye. Well, that didn't take the sort of time I thought. I'll have 6:08.
You can go to A.
We can receive and file reports. Do we have any? Or who's?
Quarter of Veterans Affairs.
I would move that we receive and file the reports for the Recorder, Veterans Affairs, General Assistance, Humane Society, and Conservation.
Second.
Discussion, none? Tracy?
McIntyre.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeCook.
Aye. Going to be in a slight pause for another 45 seconds. And then we're gonna go back to item number 4, public hearing. And frankly, we can, yeah, we should probably wait. Right, I have 6:10. Lindsay, would you like to start?
Yeah, Webb's RV Park is owned by Dale and Linda Webb. It's zoned A1 and FPC. The rezoning is being pursued to bring the property into compliance with the zoning ordinance to rezone the property from A1 agricultural and FPC floodplain and conservation to C2 general commercial highway service districts. The use shall continue in its current state as an RV park without further expansion. There was a special use permit issued back in 1982 for 30 spots. The Webbs now currently have 101 spaces. They have expanded upon that special use permit. We have asked them to come into compliance with a rezoning request to A1, or from A1 and FPC to C1. They've operated out of compliance with zoning regulations for years. We've been working with the Webbs and Environmental Health and Webbs attorneys and our office to bring the existing RV park and campground into compliance with no further expansion. We recommend approval of the compliance rezoning request for Webb's RV campground with no further expansion. I know there was numerous neighbors that were concerned about the rezoning request at previous meetings. Notices did go out on January 7th for this meeting. The day we actually rescheduled this meeting until tonight. Those meeting notices did go out to everybody, notification for tonight's meeting. I know the Webb's attorney is here to address this, and the Webb's RV Park, the zoning commission recommended 4-1 to recommend approval of the rezoning application with restrictions to you. So.
I would move that we go to a public hearing regarding rezoning application from A1 and FPC to C2 submitted by John Judish of Stuyvesant, Benton, and Judish. Property owners are Webb RV Park, Dale and Linda Webb.
Second.
Discussion, none? Tracy?
McIntyre.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
DeCook.
Aye. Okay, we are now in public session. Public hearing. Who would like to?
Well, good evening. My name is John Judish, attorney with Stuyvesant, Benton, and Judish on behalf of Dale and Linda Webb and Webb's RV Park. I do have a packet that I provided for each of you, and kind of prepared for all things. It doesn't appear that there's really any opposition here tonight, so I don't want to waste a lot of your time speaking if that's unnecessary. But there's just a few brief things I just want to comment on in light of the last meeting when I was in attendance and some of the statements that were made. There's a lot in here, and I'm not going to talk nearly the length of the packet that I've given you, but there's just a couple of things I do want to highlight. In the first page here, this kind of greenish blue area, that is an easement that was granted back in 1968. You may recall that there was individuals here at the last time on behalf of the Richards Trust. The Richards Trust owns all this land around here where you see the capital R, and you might be able to see the type written in red where it says Richards. Long before the Webbs even owned any of this land, that particular easement here was granted to prior owners. Back in 1964, the Richards conveyed some of this ground to a last name Semino. 1968, this easement was granted from Richards to individuals called Taylor, and that applied to their heirs. In 1970, Taylor then conveyed their land to Semino, and then it was Semino in 1977 that conveyed the land to Webb. I just want to point that out because there was some indication that what the Webbs are doing with their RV park somehow violated the terms of an easement. That actually is not true, and I just want to clarify that so there's not some negative thought process towards the Webbs. So this easement as existed occurred in 1968. And later in the documentation, you'll actually see where that is located. What you're going to see here is maps of the area. You're going to see portions I've taken out of the abstracts related to there. So there's nothing in that easement. That easement was granted long before the Webbs even owned the property, but they do have the benefit of that little easement right here. What you see here with WWW, all of this, all that was owned by the Webbs. Now there's a sliver that runs along the very north, just south of the river, that kind of dips down. That's actually still owned by Warren County. There's another little sliver here owned by Warren County, but the Webbs have that sliver. The point of all that is, all of this ground here was owned by the Webbs. That was before it is now owned by the descendant of the Sheets who owned it earlier. So what happened was Dale then and Linda created these parcels, and then they sold off those parcels. It just so happens that the 3 parcels to the right, that is still owned by the Sheets. But when Dale sold that ground, he held back for himself the easement that runs along so he could have access to his property. So this was a property Dale owned. They then sold it to others, withheld a part so they could continue to access their property. That easement is first noted back in 2000, and you'll see that in the adjoining documentation that I gave you. It wasn't until 2006 that the Webbs conveyed that property to the Sheets, and that's the parents of the Sheets that own it now. So I just want to briefly comment, this whole issue of easement, I believe, was a red herring, and there's no basis. I just don't want there to be any negative thoughts on the Webbs that they're somehow doing something in contradiction to an easement. That just is not the case. Those easements were long in existence before, and then Mr. Webb and his wife created that easement when they conveyed the property. Attached also, basically there's photographs as you drive from Highway 5 all the way back to Webb's RV Park. And I've kind of made notes on there so you can see the different easements that I'm talking about. I don't expect you to go to each page, but right here, this shows you're coming down on Carpenter, and right as you go off to go into Webb's RV Park, that's where you're gonna hit this little easement right here that was granted by the Richards a long time ago. Once you then get past that, then you're going to be on Buchanan Trail, and Buchanan Trail, that again is the road that Mr. Webb kept back for himself as the easement. And that just kind of shows you right here, it's all marked on there. The other thing I just want to point out, if you look at all the photographs on the drive from Highway 5 back to the RV park, there are multitudes of farm ground, tillable farm ground. I know there's been discussion on to what extent, if any, does having this RV park impact the roads. And you'll see photographs of how the park looks now. You'll see the types of vehicles that are in the park now. You will note I circled even one of them, there is a tiny home, but you can clearly see that that tiny home is on wheels, and I circled the wheels because there's an issue about whether or not these fixtures, well, not fixtures, but these RVs are mobile. They are mobile. But in addition to all the farm ground that's out there, there are combines, there are tractors, there are semis that are all going all around that area that have an impact on the road. So it's not just the RV park that is to blame for any road condition. And again, the Webbs aren't here asking about anything to do with roads. I just point that out because that was a discussion that we had last time. At least those that are in opposition had raised to it. There's now public hunting ground, and I can show you a photograph of the sign that says it's public hunting ground. There's now a DNR boat ramp. So there's a lot of usage on these roads, and I think it's unfair to attribute a horrible road condition, if that exists, solely to Webb's RV Park. I think there's a lot of other things that use those roads that have a much greater impact than someone driving a truck and a fifth wheel behind it compared to a combine or a semi-truck. So anyway, I won't take any more of your time, but I just wanted to point out some of those aspects in light of the opposition that was made before. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you this evening. I appreciate you allowing to reschedule till tonight because I had a conflict the last time. But I would just ask that you go ahead and approve the recommendation by zoning to allow the Webbs to change this so that way they can be in compliance. Last thing I would want to point out is on the northern half here, the Webbs do have the ability as it stands right now to add more sites. So I don't want people to think that the Webbs aren't giving up anything in this. They are. They're agreeing to limit themselves to any further expansion. I understand there's a disagreement and they can expand on the southern half, but they still could on the northern half. And so by entering into this agreement, they are at least giving up something and agreeing not to do that any further. And I suppose one final point is, I don't think that anybody is saying that the Webbs kind of expanded over time out of some sort of false pretense or evil intent. Dale has indicated he thought he had the ability to do that. I don't think, and again, Ms. Bowman will jump in if she disagrees, but I'm not saying that necessarily there's documentation that says Dale couldn't, but I also don't think there's documentation that says that he couldn't. So I just want all of you to consider that and thinking this isn't necessarily the Webbs are here trying to get by with something. It is what it is, and we're trying to work with all of you and work with the recommendation of zoning to get it reconciled. And for that reason, we hope that you go ahead and grant the approval. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Are you taking questions, Mr.
I'm
Chair?
happy to.
Does the board have any questions for him?
I would, but maybe, I need maybe Lindsay to shed a little light. Apparently, it would go to the 101. That's what the zoning,
Yes, there will be no further expansion as it stands right now, absolutely. And we've already signed that agreement that was prepared by the county, and I believe you have the original. I certainly have our signed copy as well.
and did they have some restrictions? Did
The restriction is they can't expand any further.
101?
So 101 is
On that section though.
in the campground at all. So once it's rezoned, that restriction applies to the newly rezoned park.
But they could come in and ask zoning,
They could come in and ask for variance, I suppose,
Yeah.
or they could ask to change it, but that's the agreement that they've signed and they willingly agree
sure.
that they won't expand.
And that would apply to any subsequent owner of that property as well.
Yes,
That was my question.
that's also
Sorry.
true.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the public tonight that would like to speak on this issue?
I would move we go back to regular session.
Second.
McIntyre?
Aye.
Scholl?
Aye.
DeCook?
Aye.
I think this would be appropriate. I would move that we accept what zoning voted for.
You want to rezone from A1 to approve the zoning from A1 and FPC to C2 commercial
And
Waive the third reading.
with also approving the restriction for the 101 campsites only and no further expansion,
then waive,
the third reading.
that's my motion.
Unless you want to, I mean, you have the option to hear it.
You can hear it a third time if you want to.
That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I have one question for our zoning commissioner. The 4-1 vote, what was the no vote? What was the rationale? I didn't see it offhand.
He was just not, he just didn't think that